this. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to rumble?
Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Bottom Rarity Live's The Build Show. I've got Ralph, of course, Johnny with us. Happy birthday to Lloyd. He isn't with us tonight. Celebrating birthday as he should be. So we're going to carry on and finish up the last of the module series that we've talked about. We've worked with so far the previous modules that we've done gator foam. I got pieces of it now since I've done some cutting, so actually it's a little easier to see the material type of it. But that's all that's holding the modules together is that. It's a problem. Gator foam, as we talked about before, has got a thin veneer on the surface, 30-second give or take. Foam, but a thin veneer. This is the real thick stuff. In my unique case, I did want to use that. As part of the experiment, I have tried a few different adhesives that I'd used previously. And always used. Ralph uses it too. Liquid Nails for Projects material. I'm a big fan of that material. It's a good adhesive for it, or it has been for the most part. But in a few places where I've moved modules around a lot, I've had a little bit of trouble with it letting loose. Ralph has not had that experience, however. Worked pretty good for you, right?
Exactly.
But I wanted to try some experiments. I've tried a whole bunch of glues. I'd done quite a bit of experimentation a long time ago with it. I'd used spray foam adhesive a long time ago, but this is effectively Gorilla polyurethane glue. It's effectively an equivalent to the spray foams. It had been
Stand by for technical difficulties.
sorry about that. Dog walking through here. She's trying to pick the dog up. Yeah. I wasn't planning on that. So anyway, I'd used spray foam. Ken Patterson has used that quite extensively. I tried working with that too. It just expands quite a bit, number one. And number two, probably the most significant problem is, unless you buy the Pro with the spray knob and stuff, every time you open a can of it, you use all of it or none of it, and the can's gone. That's not very cost effective, especially if you're working in small quantities or want to, use a little bit to work with it a little bit. I'd seen Kit Patterson recently use this Gorilla Glue polyurethane glue, the standard, brown stuff that everybody thinks of. When you say Gorilla Glue, this is what most people think you're talking about, versus like the Gorilla brand wood glue or Gorilla brand super glue. It is an expanding foam. It does expand, much like the spray foam, just not nearly as extensively. So you will have to use some weight on it. It is the toughest stuff I've worked with. So far, all of these modules are done with the Gorilla Glue material. I've done all of them with it and had great success so far. I do have to put weight on it, though. Also, you got to wet it. It's water activated. If you read the description, it'll tell you that too, but I, like a lot of us, probably don't read instructions all the time either. Now, our first modules we built and that I took a chainsaw to, which was great fun. And if you're trying to work quickly, which is part of the name of this game, one, I wanted to build modules that were quite thin. Gatorboard does a pretty good job of doing that. I wanted them to be spectacularly light, and I didn't want anything exposed underneath them like wiring to keep my modules quite thin. These modules that we've worked on so far, the one that you've seen so far, the couple more that you're going to see tonight that I've continued to progress onwards with, are 2 inches thick at the thickest component from clearance of the bottom deck to railhead. They're about 2 inches thick. Maybe you could even get them tighter if you were working with, less undulating scenery as I am with modeling Appalachia. So these are fairly sharp terrain, fairly steep hills. Some of the hills that you'll see I've worked on the next module and some that we're going to work on tonight those modules are about 18 inches high in total. Now, so far I've worked with the pink stuff, expanded polystyrene or whatever, pink, blue, green, doesn't matter, just this stuff that's not the beadboard. most of my layout has been built with this. And if you want structural integrity, this is the stuff, especially in layers. I built this first module that you guys have seen and we've worked with. I built the first module. Now it's seating. The last time you guys seen it, we covered it in ground group. Now I've covered it in dirt. I've got trees on it. I've got a mock-up of the coal loader that I'm going to be building here. So I'll show you a little bit more about that, a little bit more detail. However, I used the pink foam for it. Perfect for that particular module and for most of the layout, especially since there's very little tree cover and forest cover on the modules, just along the back edges where I'm covering the back side. Otherwise, the hills are fairly exposed dirt, as the prototype pictures that I'm working from suggest. Also, I posted some prototype pictures on the, I believe on our Facebook community a couple months ago of shooting down this valley in the coal loader. It's from a little bit earlier than the mid-'80s that I'm currently modeling or going after, but it is that area. You can see the hillside's a little, the tree cover is up the hill from the track a bit before the trees start. They had cleared it as part of the coal. And I've also, I've got coal down quite a bit down into the scenery, down in the static grass below, because they weren't, they'd have the EPA on them like they do today. However, with these last models, again, the name of the game is cost effective. Sure, that matters. In my opinion, it's super thin, quite light, so I don't need any additional structure or wood components. Again, that adds to the thickness. My goal is to get as much density of railroad in a given room as possible. I've only got 15 by 15 foot plus the overflow into the staging room, so I have to get as much density as possible, and that means multiple levels. And if I'm taking up 4, 5, 6 inches of bench work, that would 2 decks is it. Plus a hidden staging or something. But if I got the modules thin enough, I could get that to 3 levels, which is what I'm planning, at least 3. Now, speed is another concern. I want it to progress somewhat quickly, especially with some of the things that are a bit time-consuming, scenery-related, time-consuming things. So Mike Offload started talking about this a few years ago. I heard a few other people commenting about Mike Offload's work using this particular material that we're going to talk a little bit more about tonight. And Mike Rose on his recent layout extension. Any of you guys that are not following him on Facebook, you probably should. He's got he added on to his home and is extending a significant extension to his layout, and it's a pretty impressive layout. It was a pretty impressive layout. Mike Offload eventually sold him on working with this same material, often called florist foam or wet foam. They make 2 versions of this. I'm going to show you what this material is in just a second with a couple web links, but this is the wet version of florist foam. And just a second, I'm going to share a screen with you guys and show you kind of what this material, where this material comes from.
Comes from Green Foam Valley, doesn't it?
I think so. They carve it out of the hill. So, and it doesn't matter about the chemistry. We're not going to get into the depths of this thing. None of us are getting marbles and sticks and building molecule models here. This is not the direction we're going, but you've got to do a little bit of research to figure out what you're working with. Phenol formaldehyde resin, or PF, commonly referred to. They use it for a whole lot of things that some of us
Hang on a second, Andy.
What's that?
Johnny, we got to get the producer to see if he can enlarge your screen.
Oh, we can do that. Does that work better for you guys?
Nothing's changed. Really? Ah.
I got the words about as big as I could get them within, and they still fit on the screen.
Okay, up in the top right-hand corner of your share, there's 3 little dots. Top right-hand corner.
Of mine?
Of your screen, top right-hand corner.
But I zoomed way up. I zoomed a bunch.
Okay, continue.
It's not getting the
That's
large
no,
letter.
that's okay.
Okay, so you may be familiar with Bakelite. It's the original form of plastic dating back to around the turn of the 20th century. It's one of the earliest forms. Another product often referred to as Oasis because there's a company called Oasis that made this product that invented fluorofoam in the 50s. It's been around a long time. Nothing new about this. It's just new to model railroading per se. So this was a company that made this product starting in the 40s. They've got a wet version of the foam. They call Oasis, and a dry version that's kind of I don't know. It kind of breaks up. Doesn't hold very good. I've tried a little bit. I've got some of that. I played with it as well. You can buy the material from this Oasis company, styrofoam. That's a lot of it. You buy it. This is from the actual vendor. So if you went to Hobby Lobby sells it. Honestly, Walmart sells this exact same product in the white version. So you can order this in green or in white. Walmart sells this in white in their craft section. But buying an individual stick of the stuff for $5 is not going to go very far. Now, buying a case of the stuff is a bunch of pieces of this stuff. I mean, that would be, it's a lot of it. I'll show you how we use it here in a moment to make it a little more effective use. That's the larger pieces. You can also buy these smaller pieces. Also, again, florist stores carry it. Hobby Lobby carries it. You know, that's 300 something bucks. That's MSRP. You know, you could get it cheaper buying it from a wholesaler, obviously, but that's 120 pieces. Now let's drop off the screen share and get back to talking about this. Okay. So this is the larger pieces that you're gonna get. 3 foot by 1 foot, 2 inches thick. It's slightly different in thickness to the pink foam that you're more familiar with, ever so slightly, but it starts to make a difference when you're doing a significant grain. However, that's one of the places where I've seen the benefit of the expanding polyurethane foam. It expands and fills what little gap is in there. In some cases where I've had a little bit of difference, what I've done is put the glue down. Another thing about the polyurethane glue or the Gorilla Glue, while we're talking about that, is that it aligns with my views of working with these modules completely. Expedience. It's super fast to work with. What I was finding with basically every other adhesive that I've had any success with, you're talking a couple days setup time. At least a day, probably a couple days setup time. With the Gorilla Glue, 30 minutes, you can work with it and carve it. A couple hours at most. It's hard to break loose without cutting it, and it's tougher than the styrofoam. These are the smaller pieces. You can buy, cases of these. These work just fine, especially considering how we intend to use it. It's not a structural component. You're not going to build up hills with the stuff. The goal, in my experience, is to basically cut pieces like this. I will show you on the layout in a second how that actually works on the modules. So you build up your levels with pink styrofoam, stepping back a couple inches from your track or from whatever your front facade needs to be, and you end up with levels of green styrofoam spacing up the front of the hill. Now, this is where the advantage starts to show. So you're building just the facade of this stuff. So a single sheet of this stuff will do about, say, 12 or 14 inches tall, the entire facade of it, 3 feet long. So a single sheet, $5 or $6. You've got a hillside, much like what we're working with. Let's change cameras. So here, what I've been working with. Also, to show you as we work through the process. Starting over here is the modules that we worked on last time. Largely pink foam. Again, much of the hillside is exposed. As they cut back, you've got a working cold loader facility here. The little valley, which will have a photo backdrop on it as it goes against the wall. A little valley with a couple structures here and a road cutting through where the coal trucks would run. And a grade crossing here. Couple tracks, couple turnouts, one on either side of the crossing.
You're not going to break out the chainsaw tonight? Okay.
No, no, can't break out the chainsaw. I didn't bring my hard hat home.
Okay.
So, and working with the pig farm again, the chainsaw is about expedience too. I mean, glue the pig stuff down with the a module of gator board, a couple sheets of pig styrofoam, slap down, Gorilla glue on it, spray it with water, stick some weight on it, give it 30 minutes, come back, and a chainsaw, which that's like a visit to the shrink anyway. That's just that's just getting it out. That's good stuff. I really enjoy the chainsaw effort.
Okay.
It solved an additional problem for me. I bought a chainsaw to clean up around the fence with, and Kim Patterson took a chainsaw to some modules only once on one video, and I was like, that's what to do for some of it. I needed to cut through when I did the aluminum trim coil backdrops in my layout room and cove the corners and stuff. I hadn't built the modules that way. But this is all a working experiment. This is the first layout I built, better than a decade, and I didn't know how I was going to solve those problems, whether I was going to have to cove corners or not. I didn't. So I had to cut those cove corners off, and some of those were 7, 8, 9 ply styrofoam thick. So that's going to be pretty hard to cut with my typical and preferential tool for working with the layout. That's really tough work. Doable, but that's some tough work. But I took the chainsaw, whacked those corners off. It was a minute and a half, being gentle the first time. The chainsaw's perfect for working with the pig stuff. It is a bit messy, which is why we did that stuff at the office in my garage up there. And now all of this, this is all the green foam. That's the stuff we're going to be working with in a moment. This hillside is entirely built in green foam and planted in trees. What's so
correct me if I'm wrong. The green foam is not, you can't statically charge it. So it's not going to go flying all over the place and statically stick to something. When you cut it or sand it, it just drops straight down, right? So it's easy to clean up.
Absolutely. And it doesn't even make too much of a mess when it does so. It comes off, it kind of sheets or it flakes off almost.
Right.
My preference now for cutting the pink stuff here, where all I'm doing is backing this and building the hillside up. I just use my straight edge of the knife. I'm cutting straight edges to make a stair step or terrace hill. And then I started cutting the florist foam to put in front of it. And I've tried a couple different things. I started with the utility knife. It works just fine if I'm making straight cuts with it. I do use the utility knife. But for carving the front of the hillside, I started out with a hacksaw blade. Actually, I started out with a brand knife. And then I went and got a hacksaw blade, took it out of my traditional hacksaw. And the next time I was at I think Walmart getting some more Gorilla Glue, I found that little contraption. I'd seen these before, but I never had a use for that particular version of it. That's spectacular. I mean, what it bends, it can be bent easy to make, nice coats. This is a really good working tool. It's not so great for pink foam, but it's great for the florist stuff. Also, the florist stuff is not hard on blades, not like the pink stuff. I mean, the pink stuff kills these blades. It kills these blades something fierce. I can't build a module that I don't go through 5 or 6 blades. And I've used the same blade building every bit, cutting, carving a bunch of this florist stuff. It doesn't hurt it. But this is pretty fun. It's not too messy. And you can carve it with a shop vac in your left hand if you wanted to. Now, here's where the advantage starts to come in. So you are taking the additional measure of building up the pink stuff and then setting the florist in first. However, this isn't particularly painted, but the point also is to not damage this property as we apply scenic properties. But planting trees on it, this is exactly what this material is meant for. Is you can plant trees in it. Super easy. So I planted 50 or 60 trees. I intended to just plant the first little start of it. I planted 50 or 60 trees like it was nothing. I mean, in 10 minutes or something. Whereas typically with the pink stuff that I've covered most of the time covered in ground goop, I'm having to go through with an awl and poke holes and find those holes if I've got leaf cover. And so this module, I've got static grass and down low and leaf cover up higher. Now I have found a few tricks that work better for me. The leaf cover is fine. It works. I've got leaf cover on all of it. You don't want to make it too terribly thick or make the surfacing too terribly hard. So I've been installing the leaf cover with some Mod Podge and then spraying Mod Podge on top of it, much like you see people like Joey Ricard use hairspray or something like that, spraying and soaking into it. The Mod Podge stays really rubbery, so you can still stick the trees through that material. I've even stuck little small bushes and little small twigs and sticks through it and not had too much of a tendency of it breaking. But you don't want to cover this stuff in ground goo. Now I'm going to take the camera off. So if you haven't taken your drive leaf for the evening,
but you could use something like matte medium, thin it out,
absolutely,
and spray it like glue.
Absolutely, and that's quite similar to the Mod Podge that I use anyway, which is effectively an artist medium that I dilute. I'm a big fan of Mod Podge or a Mod Podge as a thick medium. That medium is a great material. And probably the single best way to install ballast if you're not using a dry technique like I am with just alcohol. If you're working with a wet adhesive, matte medium is my preferred way to do ballast. Bar done. I do want to try the future floor wax thing that is popular amongst some of the O-scalers, especially for ballast. Not because I think I'm going to convert to it. I'm just curious how they get the good results that they get using Future on ballast. And you sure see a lot of the O-scaler guys use Future for ballast installation. That surprises me. But let me show you. I'll take the camera and show you guys what I've done so far and where we're at with this, and so you can get your head wrapped around the entirety of this concept. So I've started the farm module, of course, that we did before with my little mock-up for the cold loader. While we're on this previous module too, let's cover a couple of the details of that. So I'm just kind of working on a mock-up of what that cold loader will be. This will be built into this piece that you're getting ready to see what's unique about it. And so if you remember, you may not, there's a track behind this module that has to make a return path to get after the trains go all the way around the top level, they need a return path. I needed a couple ways to access those. One is that they are accessible here in the valley. What I'm doing is putting a short photo backdrop here with trees on it, and I have trees along this backdrop, and there'll be a photo backdrop carved and scalloped to the tops of the trees, and a photo backdrop here. However, there is a track or a spot, at least a spot for a track back behind this module, or back behind this little photo backdrop. So this photo backdrop is 2.5 inches, I think it's 2.5 out from the wall. So it is kind of a tiered situation. I might even use some lights creatively there. But I wanted to be able to reach that track at least every 3 or 4 feet. So here I've used some grass mat material that comes on the rubber backing, basically. I think this is Hecky. I'm not positive, but Hecky, there's a bunch. I basically made a plug. So this module has the grass mat material that I'm sure it's hard to see on camera, but it overhangs the edges a bit. And with the cold loader, I can build the cold loader into the plug, set it back in place. I could even build 2 of these. One, if I wanted to return to modeling 1950 some of the time, I could build one that was a wood cold loader to emulate or to simulate that period. And I could model what I'm going to do with this cold loader. It's going to be a gator foam backed structure that will be corrugated metal on the surface. But this lets me remove the cold loader as a diorama and into the hillside as it's built into the hillside, and also reach that back track in the event I need to remove some misbehaving freight cars or something. And we've worked our way along the module. So this module is, first pass complete. I'm getting ready I'm going to put it up and lay the track on it right away. Scenically, it's first pass complete. Now, as we move over to the second module, let's get some slack on the wire. Here I've played. Oh, this is too dark. All right, pause for 1 second. Let's get some light on the subject. Bear with me, 30 seconds.
Yeah. There's another tripod went to the ground.
Now we're getting somewhere. All right.
Let the sun in. Ooh.
That's right. Now you can see. So I played it. Yeah, it's fairly bright. I needed something. The point is of these modules especially, and let's move the equipment out of the way. But the camera, it's hard to get a scale and proportion. So I wanted you guys to get an idea of the proportionality going up the hill. That's about, that hillside is about 15 inches from track height, from railhead height. It's about 15 inches high to the top of the gradient or the hillside, plus some small trees on top. I'm working with 2 or 3 inch trees on top, working my way down to 7, 8, 9 inch trees with a few of the of the nicer trees that I make with sagebrush here along the front edge to to kind of show size and proportion correctly. Also, as I've worked along, what I found that worked, I started out by covering it all effectively with leaf. Some years ago on some of the first on the lower deck modules. What I've been doing lately, because the viewing angle that you see the layout from, especially this layout, this section of it, but even my primary deck, you're always looking up at it. This module is up above eye level, and you're going to be looking up at it, slightly above eye level. You can reach up to uncouple, but you're always looking from this angle. So you're looking up through the forest floor. You're always looking up through the forest floor. So it's critical that you get a bunch of trees or a bunch of trucks into the trees. So what I've done is, you see along the front edge, there's a bunch of trees real closely together. So what I end up doing is planting a bunch of just straight sticks, like you see that I'm doing over here. And I end up pushing my super trees straight over top of those sticks so that I get much more branch and truck structure through the forest because you can't take super trees and shove them into each other the way the way real trees grow. They don't intermingle, or the super trees don't. But as you can see here, we've got all the way from trees. I will be right the way of the light too. From trees to the first pass on the stuff that I do at the bottom of the module with the cut up leaves, run through a food processor. And then I run my first row of trees. And then I get down at eye level and sight up through. And as I plant trees further back, soon as I start to lose visibility to the forest floor, I stop putting leaves on the top levels, and I just fill it out with, this is some kind of moss. I'll use lichen. A lot of the fine scale modelers kind of condemn lichen, but it's good as effectively a view block. So I'll use lichen along the top edge, underneath the trees, or like polyfill or some of that material, just to fill out so that you can't see all the way through the forest floor. It ends up always getting blocked about halfway through anyway. So all you need is all these sticks and such that are along the front edge. All you need depth-wise on those is you just need those sticks for the first couple inches. And then you have a busy edge of the forest that looks like, look at the, you got to look at the real world. If you're weathering a freight car, if you're scratch building a structure, you've got to look at pictures or the real world. So at least look at pictures if you live in a western area. For me, this is Kentucky. I can look at forest, all day, any day without any serious problem. So I went out and looked at them, and you just see a tremendous amount of density of trees that you cannot recreate with super trees.
Do you model fallen trees in amongst those things?
Yes, yeah, I've got some. It's hard to see,
Like
but
just trunks on the
there's
ground?
some laying down. Yeah, there's some laying down in there. I've got some rock in there. I've got some moss. I've even got some static grass up in the trees in spots. So my goal here is to have a little bit more of a clearing for a spot with a little bit of, a little bit of tall grass that has grown up there. Variability. You need a lot of variance. Again, look at the real thing for inspiration, They got a little stick stuck everywhere, basically. But here you can see the whole process from all the way from starting with rough green foam stuck on top of pink stuff that you can see poking through. It hasn't been shaped yet. We'll start working on that in a minute too. To the carved green foam that's been carved here. Sometimes, in some places, I've had luck just carving it without having to use any of the ground goop at all. I do use the ground goop, but you don't want to cover all of the scenery with it because you're filling in the holes and you lose the ability to plant into it. So you lose all the benefit. You want to leave the surface exposed, much as I have here. And you need to paint that with I painted it with a house paint that's like, a thimble of paint to, 1 part paint to 5 or 6 parts water, something like that. So that you leave the holes exposed. So we could easily plant sticks. We can easily plant sticks into that stuff. That doesn't hurt it. Even the leaf material here doesn't damage the ability to plant trees in it.
So You Are Naked says you should equip your trees with decoders and speakers so that if it falls, it can make a sound. But then if a tree does fall in the woods,
That's right.
does it make a sound? We don't know.
That's right. Hard to prove. I will have speakers. Behind the valance has worked the best for me, except for in the river section. I'm going to put some speakers in the river section with some water effects. For those, it seems like the speakers being the closest to the scenery as possible makes the most sense. But I am going to put speakers, small speakers behind the valance. I've got a whole bunch of them to have birds chirping and dogs howling at sunset, stuff like that. But the problem you get into where you need those sticks that makes so much difference is you can't take super trees. They will not basically shove together. And especially, very little. And these are raw super trees that have just been spray bombed. When you take trees that are finished, because I sit down and make trees up in bulk with, straighten them up in bulk and sit down and leaf the trees with leaf flake material. They won't intermix the way they should, at least not much. I try to push them in as close as I can. But you still got trees that are spaced 30 or 40 feet apart. Of course, the trunks are not very convincing on these trees anyway. I've seen people take hot glue guns to build up the trunk size. That's not bad, especially at end scale, that would work. What I've had better luck doing is taking, small bits of sagebrush and little pieces of trunks or whatever, put those out in the front edge or whatever, then slide super trees down over the sticks. If I'm going to make a really nice foreground tree, the way I do, then I cut the super trees up and glue them to this. But for a background tree, I could just use some of these trunks along the front, set super trees down over top of it, have a few decent super tree or sagebrush built trees along the front so that your eye is drawn to those. And if you see those really awesome trees and you see more trunks like this than the alternative, the eye fills in the rest of the gaps. And all of this stuff is fake it. So it's all an illusion. But even the super trees that are somewhat fragile, so planting them in the pink foam, especially, and that's the reason that the ground goop that I use, I don't like using the white glue in that mixture. One, because the first time I ever heard of it was from Mike Coffalo, and he didn't use the white glue in his mixture. So when I first tried it, I didn't know about the white glue. Then when I started doing a little more research to figure out where it came from, of course, Mike had mentioned that he had heard about it from Lou Sassy, but didn't know the origin of it. Best I could figure out, Lou Sassy is the origin of it, and he did have white glue in his mixture. And I have tried it that way. Depending on your application, you may prefer it. There are cases where the white glue, is a benefit to it, especially for like a river basin, for example. But I like it to be more flexible, like the latex, letting the latex paint be the whole of the adhesive. It's easier to poke holes through. But you still got to poke holes through in the leaf flake and find those holes with these somewhat fragile trunks. However, with just the super trees planting them in the green foam, I mean, there's nothing more than sticking them straight in. You can plant these bad boys as fast as you can walk with them, basically. As fast as you can pick them up and stick them into the material. I mean, you can plant 50 trees in a matter of a couple minutes, whereas with any other method of that I've used, you're going to spend quite a bit of time planting trees. Also, as I said, I found, well, it depends on, entirely depends on your particular layout. For me, where I build the modules down at eye level, I can fill in the trees somewhat front to back. Can always do that. It's kind of reverse of what you actually should be doing most of the time. But if I fill them in from front to back, I can often save a lot of trouble with leaf cover. So I only need leaf cover up about, maybe 6 inches or 8 inches into the tree canopy. That's the right word for it, canopy. That's what we're trying to build. And we're trying to get something that looks better than, puffball trees that most of us all grew up reading about or building layouts that have puffball trees. And they serve their purpose.
Okay, so going back to the theory of depth perception, when you plant your big trees in the front, as you go back, you want to have smaller trees so that it gives that illusion.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's kind of hard to do since the big trees in the front are tall and you're getting smaller and going up a hill, so it keeps the tops of the trees almost at the same height.
Well, and honestly, angles are hard to show on this. So I gained, as you go back, the mountain hillside here is 10 inches, let's say, of depth of tree. I mean, just lateral, horizontal depth. There's about 10 inches from the front trees all the way to the back trees is about 10 inches. And I'm gaining 15 inches in that 10 inches. So it's extremely steep. Steeper than it should be, probably. I mean, Appalachian Mountains are quite steep, but I also only have so much ceiling height to work with, given that this is the topmost deck of the layout. So what I've been using along the top edge is trees that are in the neighborhood of, say, 3 inches. That's probably about the average for the top. So they're about 3 inches at the top. These background trees at the tallest, they're about 7. Some of these, like this tree is this is a foreground, nice custom, built tree. I glue stuff together. That's a sagebrush tree. There's a few of these oddballs. Most of these trees here are, say, 6 inches. So you're starting at 1 inch off the, up or something in height. You've got 15 inches to work with. You're gaining 6 inches here. So the tops of these first trees are about 7 inches off from the track level. The tops of the back trees, you're 15 inches styrofoam plus a 3-inch tree, you're about 18 inches. So that distance right there, that doesn't show as great on camera. I can look at it now and see that it doesn't show how sloping the trees are. You lose some of that angular effect. But there is an angle still to the trees. Yes, because of the selective compression, the sharp height gain of the mountains, some of that's lost. But I did it intentionally. I wanted it much sharper than I needed to so that the trees could make up that effect.
Okay.
And that way the trees get smaller in, horizontal, an actual width and horizontal size as much as they do in height. So you can't actually tell that these trees back here are actually that much shorter necessarily, but they're just smaller trees.
But then that difference in size, it takes away from the drastic slope that you started off with, the bare slope. It actually
That's right.
levels it out a bit.
Right, a bit. So if you just look at the hillside slope, again, I don't think the camera does, shows this slope as steep as it is. But again, it's gaining, back there is 21 inches high, gained in 10 inches. So you're talking about a slope that's
About 60 degrees.
60 degrees.
Roughly.
It's something like it's a slope, something in the neighborhood of that, with the front face. Now, when you're working with the trees on it, your top trees are only about, that tall. Your bottom trees are about 6 inches tall. You still have a fairly sharp angle
Well,
of tree.
now you get it down to about 45.
Yes, which seems much more reasonable. Now, I would love to have the ceiling height to work with. Whenever I move the layout either to an external building or to a basement of a new house, 9 or 10-foot ceiling will be a part of my plan, probably. But my goal is to have enough, depending on what I do, if I go into a large basement, it'll be a single level layout at eye level. But I'll have mountains that go 3 or 4 feet high, because you want to enforce how tall the Appalachian Mountains are compared to the river level or track level. Here I have to fake some of that stuff, of course, because I've only got this track height is at 80 inches off the ground, off the floor. Now, in front of the coal loader, I have a raised floor section, so it is reachable. But as you get over into other parts of the layout, you're definitively looking up, which is why, and I'll show you, you guys hadn't seen the front profile. The modules the top deck modules do not have a fascia on them. So I may end up with a small bit of fascia where this road comes across. I'm still figuring that out. I'm thinking about putting a bridge going across and letting the bridge come out into the air. Just basically having, cut this back some and put a abutment in and have a part of a concrete road bridge hanging out there so I can bring this back to a slope. But the layout comes to a point. It's all above eye level, so you're looking up at a sharp angle. The layout comes to a point. This actually hangs down an inch below the gator board, so that for a couple inches back under the module. That way I can hide the LED light strips. It depresses again up under the module, so I can hide the LED light strips up under here for the lower level. But when you're looking up at the layout, all you're doing is looking at a point. It just comes to a sharp point everywhere. So when you're looking here, it'll do the same thing along this front module here as well. You're starting from you'll be looking from a sharp point and looking up through the trees. So, I mean, Shaquille O'Neal might have a slightly different experience, but for the rest of us, we're going to be looking at it up through the trees like this. And, you should be able to see the tops of the trees as they continue to climb up in elevation.
Right.
But over in the corner, where you see that section I'm working with there, that I'm designing that section, it's flat across that hill. At that point, I'm basically just running the mountain right up into the ceiling, because I've run out of ceiling height to make to fill in a mountain. So I'm just running it into the mountain, so it's straight up. And here you can even see how steep it is. We're gaining, let's see, effectively every 4 inches we're gaining. Every 4 inches in height, back about 2 inches or less. Sometimes I go up 4 inches, I'm only stepping back an inch. It's significant. It's quite sharp of an increase in climb. So, and the name of the game is this stuff is not exactly cheap. It is more expensive than pink foam. But if you use it sparingly as a facade, as I've done this whole hillside, that whole module, which again is 15 to 18 inches high in spots, all with green foam, took either one of these sheets or two. So, these sheets are $5 or $6 if you buy them individually, something like that. You can buy a case of 20 of them. They might cost $10. I don't know. Individually, you buy a case of them for a couple $100. So, in one of these, if you use it correctly and sparingly and cut back and forth, making angles start so you have very little waste. I mean, these are pieces that I cut off the front edges of it. They're reusable. I've already used some of them. So for every 2-inch by 2-inch square, let's say your hillside's 45 degrees, give or take. Mine's a little sharper, but if it's 45-degree hillside, for every 2-inch by 2-inch square of it, every time you take this piece and cut 2 inches off of it, you get 2 lengths of this material. You get 2 3-foot lengths of it. You can cover 6 foot of hillside with a 2-inch strip off this thing. So you can cover a great deal of space with it, and it goes in super fast. You can plant trees on it super fast. It's much easier to carve. Also, if you had it as a surfacing material, if you did a field with it for effect, I think it'd be great for doing an agricultural site, a farm of some kind, because it's so easy to depress or to work with. I mean, you can press it if you've ever messed with, if you've ever held a piece of florist foam that come on the bottom of some flowers, you can press it down and you can rub it to make it smooth just with your finger. And you could easily make the tracks that would make a road or a farm field in it. They rub in it with your fingers to make tracks that make it roughly smooth. If you press it down, you can make it fairly smooth. So it'd be real easy to take a piece, a thin piece, lay it out, take a tool or your finger and rub cornfields or whatever into this material. So it's really nice for working with that, to build out undulations. Although ground goop does that job just fine too. The key to this is how quickly you can throw up some scenery and stick a bunch of trees in it. I built that hillside in one evening, and I stuck all the trees that I have in it, minus the couple I stuck in with you guys on camera here, in about 10 minutes. Whereas covering just I've got 60 or 70, 80 trees over there. I've only put about 20 on this module, and I spent 2 or 3 hours putting those 20 or 30 or 40 trees on this other module.
Okay, so the question then comes in, how long did it take you to make the trees?
Well, if they're super trees, just super trees, I mean, if I just take a super tree base that's pretty decent, straighten it out, I use the soldering iron technique. Again, expedience. I would use the matte medium or something and soak them and hang them up or whatever. But that's just a slow process. I would do it for some particularly troublesome trees, but I soak the whole batch in glycerin so they get a little soft already. Take them out and dry, take a soldering iron and straighten them, stick them into styrofoam, spray bomb them. So if I'm starting from that right there and cover them in leaf flake, I could do 100 or 200 or 300 an hour. I could do a box of them in an hour probably. Now, if you're talking about some of the foreground trees, they vary pretty tremendously. I've got that process down to much faster than I originally started at. The first tree I made probably took 3 evenings, 8 to 10 hours. At this point, I think I could make a pretty good sized tree in a couple hours.
Okay, so all that added together is the time working in the shop, doing all this stuff, the preparation before you start, or after you've got it laid out, you do your trees, and you just keep on going until you've got enough trees to fill your slope.
That's right. And if all you're doing, because the vast majority of my trees are just super trees, spray bombed. Sometimes I'll use a couple colors on them, especially if they're more foreground. I find once they've got leaf flake on them, if I put good trees in the foreground or nicer, or at least the pickier, the choice pick of the super tree box out front, I will do a little bit of more treatment with them, using some grays and browns to kind of dust them. I've even dry brushed some trunks on some fatter trees and had some pretty good luck. I've took a few super trees and shoved them together and made up the center trunk with some wood cutting stuff. So, I mean, the sagebrush method of making trees is my 5th or 6th technique that I had tried. But for making a foreground tree, I have not found anything else that works as well for me for making large foreground deciduous trees. The conifers are a different challenge, and if you're modeling, the Pacific Northwest, I think this I think this PF foam or the florist foam is ideal for anything that has significant tree cover, even if it doesn't have a significant.
It depends on the type of tree you're putting in. If you're going to put on a redwood or a giant cedar, then I'm not sure that foam is going to be strong enough to hold it unless you have a very long peg on the bottom of your tree, because we're talking trees. Your trees there are 10 inches, you said, roughly?
Yeah, my biggest foreground trees are about 14.
If you're going to do the western coast, you're talking trees that are at least 1.5 to 2 feet tall. And in some cases, you're going to cut the top off because you got an upper level. So you're not going to see the full tree. But it's substantial enough that you want to be able to bury deep enough so it doesn't fall over.
And you're going to want a stronger substructure, be that a plaster substructure or a ground group substructure of some kind, and like finish nails. So if I have a large body tree, I've got some of my 15-inch trees, like a lot of these smaller trees, a lot of these more, foreground trees, I just cut a T-pin. That's a stout, the largest T-pins I could get that are 2 inches, I think, or something. I cut those to give to make a screw. That works pretty well too. Cut the head off and bring it in. And I use finish nails a lot.
So once it's in place, then I do the roots.
For doing the root structure. So I more often use if the tree is much larger than that, and that tree was always going to be a bare, quote unquote dead tree, but a bare tree. For some of the larger foreground trees, especially the 14, 15-inch guys, I've got a finish nail in them. I've got a fairly large finish nail. And I'm not really doing the foreground scenery with the florist foam because I want a complete and finished forest floor with rock and moss and, the best leaf materials that I have, because you're going to see all of that intimately. It's a close connection. What I'm trying to do is I spent so much time on that track and track forward scenery and maybe that couple inches on the back side of the track that on much of my layout, that area behind that has not got the attention it deserves because I have not spent the time filling it all in with trees. But I could make regular plain Jane super trees fast as I can sit down and make trees up 100 at a time. But the time of climbing up there with it all, poking holes, finding those holes, especially when you're reaching for filling in the back areas,
T-pins.
Super fast way to work.
T-pins. You saw how I did my my vineyard. For every grape plant that I put in the ground, I had a T-pin so that I could find the hole.
Yep. I've seen Luke Tower do it, making little flags on toothpicks and all kinds of stuff like that. If you're doing a diorama and you're planting the scenery around tree placement, yes. Where the problem with the awl and having to poke that many holes really starts to suffer when I'm planting trees, every inch and a half on square, roughly, I'm planting trees. But between those trees, I'm putting, 5 or 6 or 7 other sticks. I'm planting sticks every quarter inch or half inch along the front edge of the layout. So what I've done is the very front edge of this module of this section here, the very front edge, the very front edge here, I brought pink foam all the way out because I was going to shape this. I've got, some undulations and water damage cut into it. I've, got a little creek that I'm working with, this little section, all of that's all pink foam that I've worked with there, carved that little creek basin into it. And I've got, the creek goes up into the hills too. All of that's pink. The second layer back, as soon as it starts back where the trees are going to start, that's where I start the florist foam. So I can plant all of these, very, very many sticks in the ground there. And I just stood there with a whole box of sticks and planted sticks for 5 minutes. Put a bunch of super trees on top of it. That's what the forest stage should look like. And it's all about pleasing yourself to buy the, with what you expect to look like. I've got areas like along that rock over there at the module. I've got a piece of rock work and a bunch of small tree material. All of that's carved in with pink foam. It's the right tool for the right job. The goal of the green stuff is that it carves spectacularly fast. So I can carve, I can glue all that down. Part of that is glued down. I can carve that out, with some expedience and stick it full of trees in a matter of a few minutes. So if it speeds you up, and that's, I wanted to try it for a long time. I'd watched Confalone talk about it. I'd seen Mike Rose when he built on his layout or modified his layout a few years ago, start experimenting with it after it took him a few years of Mike Rose talking to me, or Mike Confalone talking him into trying it, because it is more expensive. But if you use it sparingly, the expedience that it gains you, he says he's never seen people build late. If you listen to Mike Rose's podcast, which is a good listen, by the way, he talks about, that his CD may model at the expedience that Confalone does. He can tear a section out in a couple of weeks. He's back to full scenery at his level of scenery. If you've seen his layout, most of us have seen, and probably a good many of us admire the quality of scenery on Confalone's layout. However, all the people who know him, of course, his scenery is quite good. What I've heard every one of them say across several podcasts where they've mentioned him or whatever is just how doggone quickly he can do that work. So for us to say it's some of the best scenery out there, for me, in my opinion, it's some of the best, whole layout, general purpose scenery I've seen. I mean, there's some dioramas that are, out of this world, but for a whole layout done at that caliber and level, it's pretty hard to argue with. But all the people who know him are just amazed at how quickly he could get that done. And he says the florist bulb is one of the greatest tricks that he's found for doing exactly that.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll come back next month. We'll be moving on back to some structures for a while. Most likely, we're working on a series of other stuff. Hoping to get some modules, doing some other types of construction, possibly some wood construction techniques later. That's not how I build, but I'm hoping to get some guys who do that to come on and talk about some more of that. If you're comfortable with the traditional construction, Ralph's built his in traditional. Me and him love to argue about whether you need to or not. Whatever fits the bill for you, whatever gets you out of the chair building a layout, I'm fine with any of it. Whatever gets the job done. But we'll probably start next month, or my plan next month is to start on some scratch building stuff. I know Ralph, Lloyd has have some really good stuff with it. We're going to use Gator board again as the extension of this. We're going to build a structure with Gator board and then cover it. We're going to build that. I'm going to start on the cold loader that I've been kind of brainstorming around so far. I'm still working on the details of it because good photo. Exactly. So I've got to make up a little bit of it, use a little modeler's license to get a cold loader that looks appropriate for that brake slide. And it'll be a Gator board substructure with a facade built with something else. So we'll start on that next month unless we can get the module series, the wood module series, to move on after that. And possibly by then, when I have the last of these modules done, I would hope that by then you may get to see these modules up in the air. These modules being at 80 inches off the ground, you can quite literally not talk. It's not like talking about carrying them in there and setting them on the framework at waist height, or moving them to the layout. They are quite literally up in the air at 80 inches in the the way up there. So. And coming above your hand in places. Yeah. Okay. So we've got a pretty full week. We're trying to get everything we can out of Johnny. We got to get our money's worth out of that paycheck, and all that private jet air travel time that he's racked up lately. So we've got a Who's Big Bill Talking To show tomorrow. No, we've got a Bill show tomorrow night with signage tomorrow night, I believe.
Yeah.
Signs, everywhere signs. You don't want to hear me sing though. That's good. This is going downhill quickly. that's going to be a spectacular show anyway. I just secondhand got a little bit of information, got to follow along with side construction that they worked on, and it's impressive. The prototype was impressive. Inspiration, history, and research is impressive, and how they went about constructing it is, and that story is it's an impressive story that they went through. There's a bit of drama, a little bit of excitement. It's important,
He grew
it's
up with
amazing.
that sign.
It'll be really. Yeah, there's several signs, that they're talking about there too.
Andy, how big is your upper section width, and what do you use to brace it? That's from Sparky.
So one of the few mistakes, quote unquote mistakes, one of the things that if I could start over, I wouldn't. But if I did start over, one of the things I would have done differently on my lower level has to do with layout depth. My current level that's at eye level is 2 foot deep, and it's too deep. It doesn't need to be that. I mean, I might have done that in some spaces to get some of the curvature that I have on my layout, but I did it everywhere. I wouldn't do that again. The top modules vary from about 14 inches from 12 inches to maybe 16 inches in spots. That's the widest that top level is. And I could have even got away with a slight bit less than that, except for the fact that you need to be able to reach to it, even though it's at, above eye level, you need to be able to reach up there occasionally, just at a few spots. And like in front of the coal loader where I have an elevated floor section, you've got to reach to uncouple. Otherwise, I wouldn't even have made it that deep. It did let me experiment with some super steep hillsides there, though. But it's actually taller than it is deep. So this first module that we worked with is 14 inches. This module 13 inches, something like that. That module's about 16. Now bracing. That's a little bit trickier depending on the case. So from where it is, what I'm doing with these modules is that section's at a quarter, and I'm going to run across. So the way these modules are built, let's try to do this somewhat briefly if I can, is that they look something like. Up underneath them, they look like that, and then you've got track level up here, and the scenery goes down to the point of that level, and then you've got a 1-inch step from the in them that I can hide the lighting for the lower level. Now, most of the lighting for the lower level is still behind the valance, pointed down. So I'm putting a 1-inch, 1/8 inch thick aluminum L channel. I might even use steel in some cases if I need the tensile strength or the strength of it. But the aluminum 1/8 inch aluminum materials work pretty well for me on everything I've done so far. So in this case, there's 2 modules here, and I don't want a bracket in between them. So there'll just be an aluminum channel that goes all the way from this side all the way to that side. It deals with my lighting, and it supports those 2 modules. The next modules that go beyond this, that will be gatorboard as well, are on top of the peninsula. In those cases, at least the top modules will be hung from all thread up through the ceiling, and some aluminum L channel. I don't recommend that. That's a bit trickier than is necessary. It's a lot of trouble, but I do a lot of crazy things, so that probably explains part of that. So, but the gatorboard by itself, and a couple shelf brackets, and you're off to the races. Now, much of the rest of the shelves around the other parts of the layout do have shelf brackets on them, and I put the shelf brackets up before I put my aluminum trim coil backdrop. So those standard shelf brackets are there, and the trim coil just goes right up over top of them. And because of the way I have the scenery and the gatorboard and such, you have very little of that bracket that's visible. So that's about all that's supporting that. All right, then we've got then Thursday night, of course, we've got Johnny, Johnny's Trade Talk show we've got a full week next week as well. We've got a very own Ralph coming back next week, and we've got another big Who's Big Bill talking to, and Johnny again next week. So a pretty full couple of weeks for you guys. All right. You got anything else, Red?
Nope, I'm done.
All right.
Good job.
Done. You're good. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. This will finish up the module series. You know, we'll look back on it as I plant the modules, but next month we're going to get started on some gator board structures. Thank you guys. Have a good day.